And we will be using breakout rooms for the latter part of the session today. When they're enabled, you will see an invitation notification to join. So don't worry if you can't see that yet. So, as I mentioned, today is the next in our series on success planning. Specifically, we are focusing on points of entry for the work, recognizing that people are at very different places. Some of you already have some kind of success planning initiative underway. Others of you are hoping to get something started or just curious. And that's all great. Whatever place you are is where you should be at the moment. And we are hoping to be able to help you think about moving forward from there. So we'll be spending the first part, about the first half hour of today, giving an overview of how different communities have identified points of entry and have taken on different pieces of the work. And then we'll spend the second and third parts first breaking into smaller groups and doing some thinking about where you each are and what steps you would want to take next, and then coming back together as a full group for a discussion and determining some next steps that we can take. So we'll have the discussion and then a self-assessment protocol, and then we'll bring it all together in the end. And I also just want to mention my colleagues and to thank them for both participating today and for all the excellent work in preparing for this session. Daniela Louie, Tauhida Jackson will be helping to lead today's session, and Michelle Sadaka has been a key organizer too and is available for any support you need. So even when you're in the breakout groups, feel free to go back into the main group and ask for support. So just to make sure before we get started with the rest of the session that we all have a common understanding of what we mean at the Education Design Lab by success planning. And just wanted to ask if people can mute their mute their mics if possible. So for those of you who have already joined us before, welcome back. And this will be just a few minutes of redundancy. For those of you who are new, this is just a chance to make sure that we all are sharing and understanding. We at EdRedesign feel strongly that both because of the research base and because of what we know from our own experiences, that two things that children need to thrive are meaningful relationships and a full set of supports and opportunities. And so we bring those two ideas together in success planning and have developed a set of 4 components that together constitute our full version of what success planning involves. There's a navigator, which is an adult who forms a relationship with a child and develops an understanding of their needs and helps to connect them through a plan for action. So there has to be a tangible component of taking the information and developing a plan. Then a system of supports that can provide all of those opportunities and make sure that each individual child's needs are met. And a data platform of some kind that can capture the information and carry it forward over time and even into different locations if the child moves from one level to another or different schools to bring it all together. And finally, all of this should be coordinated by some kind of a cross-sector body that can look at the big picture and bring together a system of support around each child. We also have a set of 10 guiding principles that we've developed that are foundational to the core components. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that we do not have one set model for implementing success planning. In our view, an organization or a school district or an individual school could develop this on their own, or they could partner with an organization that's already been working on a similar approach. But regardless of what strategy they use, they should ground the work in these guiding principles and these 4 core components. And just for those of you who are new to this learning community, I just want to clarify that this is a loose group for the moment that is open to all and that's intending to bring everyone together for shared learning. In the future, we do expect to have a more structured community of practice, but for the moment, this group is accessible to everybody, and we're happy for your engagement and for your participation. And with that, I will turn it over to Daniela Louie, who will share more about the specific 4 components and how different communities have engaged with them.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lynn, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you all are today. And I apologize in advance, I might be having some glitches up the slides, so bear with me if things are moving slow. But for this section that I'm going to cover, I'm going to discuss some of the anecdotes and stories that came from the field that are really going to hopefully concretize what these components are and bring them to life. Our first case study will come from Nashville. And for this one, we're going to talk about and answer some of the design questions around navigators in Nashville. So who serves as a navigator, what the navigator does, the training required, and the time and workload to consider. So I'm going to start over here, and navigators in Nashville, they can be front office staff, they can be teachers, they can be coaches, anyone that really has a strong connection with the students. And so the brief example that we're going to share is Eva, who's an English learner high school teacher in Nashville High School. So Eva, what she does is she meets one-on-one with about 10 students every month. She also communicates with the students through an online platform where they check in with the students' social emotional health. And it's more of a space for the students to be more vulnerable. Alejandra is one of Eva's students. So using the protocol that the district developed, and they created a protocol because they know that sometimes students are sharing information that is really personal and they want to be equipped to handle it. So as Eva and Alejandra's gotten to know each other and they developed a trusting relationship, Alejandra felt comfortable sharing some information about her living situation and that she's living on her own. Eva was able to refer Alejandra to children's services to address her mental health and her housing needs. So what kind of training do the navigators need? As I mentioned, in order to equip all the navigators with the skills that they need, the district developed a really robust handbook with sample scripts to help these conversations. So Michelle's going to put in the chat box a sample of this handbook so that you can see the kind of resources that are available to navigators. So let's talk now about the time considerations. In Nashville, navigators spend about 2 hours a month meeting with students. The meetings occur during the school day, so during lunch, advisory period, or regular school time. So similar to Nashville, many of the communities have teachers and other school staff that serve as the navigators. However, other models and strategies, sometimes they'll hire a site coordinator to play this role. Similarly, some partners, some of the communities will partner with external organizations to do the training. Sometimes they're going to develop the navigator training in-house. Next, we're going to take a trip to Southern Illinois to Unity Point School District. And for Unity Point, we're going to talk about the design questions for the plans for action. So we're going to discuss who's responsible for developing and uploading the plans, what does the plan look like, and how is student and family voice incorporated. We want to really reiterate that the components of the success plan, they're not just academic. So they have to include social emotional health, physical health, social determinants of health, things like housing, food, financial needs, after school activities, things like that. So they're much more holistic. So now I'm going to just share 3 templates from Unity Point. They're obviously cluttered slides and not meant for you to look in detail. We just really wanted to show that the plans can be different based on the population or the grade level. So this one here is for English language learners that Unity Point developed. This one's for 6th grade students. And for these ones, again, the student himself fill it out. And then this one, it looks really wordy. They're for 1st graders in Unity Point. And this is one where it's a conversation with a parent to be able to better understand the student. So who's responsible for developing and updating these plans? So in Unity Point, again, navigators can be a number of different school staff, but in this example, it's a bus driver named Edwin. So Edwin serves as a navigator. He maintains and updates the plan. For example, during a one-on-one meeting with his student, Paul, he asked how he's doing in and out of school. And they discussed some of the challenges in science class, his love for soccer, his interest in the drums, but he also shared that his parents were recently divorced, and Edwin winds up updating his plan accordingly. So how is student voice included in Unity Point's plans? So for Unity Point, the students and families are truly at the center of they're the drivers of the plan. They meet with the navigators, they answer the questions themselves, they set their own goals, they learn to advocate. One really good example is a ninth grader at Unity Point who was able to clearly explain to his high school teacher why he thinks he should be placed in the higher level course, even though his middle school grades didn't look like he should be placed in them. And he actually excelled and was allowed to be in the higher level courses. And this type of self-awareness and self-advocacy is directly attributed to the success planning process that helped the student really understand their strengths and challenges and what their needs are. In other communities, sometimes the plans are managed more centrally. So it may not be by the actual student, by the actual teacher or navigator. It can be by a community-based site coordinator, like models or strategies like community schools or communities in schools. Sometimes the plans might start with just academic and social emotional health components, and they'll eventually build out to be more broad and to include after school programming, basic needs like food access and housing, things like that, more comprehensive supports. And student and family voices also, it varies. Sometimes the students and families are really involved in the day-to-day, the actual plan, like the one in Unity Point, but sometimes it's more part of the holistic family engagement strategy that the school or district has. Next, we're going to head west to Oakland. And for Oakland, we're going to talk about the design questions for the system of supports. So really quickly cover how to ensure equity, how to fund the services, and how to coordinate the system. So again, I know we keep on repeating this, but we want to make sure you realize that these supports are really supposed to be multi-sector. So it could be, legal support, transportation, housing, medical, tutor, extracurricular, all of the types of things that we've previously discussed. So for now, we're going to use Alicia as an example. So Alicia's a fifth grade teacher in Oakland Unified School District. And she noticed that her student Molly was not participating in class. She wasn't engaging with her peers, had her head down on her desk. So she referred Molly to a navigator who then got more information, also spoke with the after school program and found that Molly's behavior was the same there. And so the navigator then talked to the mom and found out that Molly recently experienced housing insecurity and the loss of her father. So the navigator was able to identify multiple supports, assisted Molly and her family, got a grief counselor and some housing support. I want to make sure, again, to cover that equity is really a core element of the success plans. They're designed to support all students. So if the plan wants to talk about or has a student who wants to do an after school program, but it's across town, really need to also address the transportation needs to make sure the student can get there. If the student can't participate in a program, maybe they have to watch their younger siblings at home, or maybe they have to work to help with the rent. Again, the plan has to adjust to make sure that that student can participate in the program and look at them really holistically. So an example of that, again, from Oakland, is that when a navigator learned that one of their students didn't pass an exam because they weren't able to see, the navigator then contacted the school nurse, who then was able to actually get eye exams and bring a vision provider in for the whole district. And so not only was that student able to get glasses, but 42 other students in East Oakland were able to get glasses to, again, improve and address the equity issues so that everyone has equal opportunity to pass those exams and be able to see and learn. So now the cost and funding sources. In Oakland, service and support, there are multiple sources. So it could be the city, it could be the county, federal government, philanthropy, in-kind services. So for example, Medicaid covers the healthcare services through their school-based school-based health centers. Oakland Parks and Rec, they offer summer camps, and the county supports a resource and referral system for juvenile justice involved students. So in terms of coordination, in Oakland, the district has over 200 partners, and they're coordinated through the community schools model. However, in other communities, sometimes the supports and services are coordinated through a collaborative body like a children's cabinet. So for example, in Hamilton Public Schools success planning, they actually take the data and the information and they feed it up to the children's cabinet so that they'll over time be able to aggregate the data, look at the services being used, look at the needs, look at the gaps, and be able to adjust at the community level to provide more services and for students. So it all depends on the community. Our last example is going to be for Louisville. And Louisville, we're going to talk about the design questions for the data platform. So what information does it capture, the cost, how the data is used at the community level, and how they maintain security. So Louisville's created something called the United Community Data Platform, and it's a community coordinated care network of health, education, social service providers. And the partners in the network, they're connected through a shared technology through Unite Us, which is the company that created the platform. And it enables them to send and receive electronic referrals, address people's social needs, and improve overall well-being across a number of sectors. So similar to when I shared the Unity Point slide, you're not meant to sort of dig into this very in detail, but just wanted to show that the platform captures information both at the individual level and at the population level. So at the population level, you can see trends in services and provision of need, right? And so at the individual level, when it's fully developed, a Navigator, they'll be able to log into the system, see what the services are that the student is having. So maybe it is after school programs, housing support specialist, mental health counselor. Permission to see the notes from those other providers is granted by the student and family through consent. And then the platform also has a closed loop referral system. So for example, if a doctor were to make a referral to a food pantry, not only would it be a referral that's made, but they'll be able to know when the student or family accesses it and close that loop. So they'll know that the service was provided. So what does it cost to develop and maintain? Metro United Way and Aetna Better Health of Kentucky, they co-sponsored this, and it's about $1 million initial invested. So it's a significant amount, but again, has a really big community impact. And they were able to get free licenses for a number of the smaller nonprofits so that it's not just the big players who are able to participate, but really local grassroots services and supports for the families. So how is the data used at the community level? So again, at the community level, leaders can use the data to really see the trends in the number and services and gaps that are needed. At the individual level, the platform connects students to all the services that they might need using a closed loop referral system. Here's just an example of data, not from Louisville, but it's actually a platform similar from Unite Us in North Carolina. And it shows how there's a decrease in intake and referral time. It shows how there's a decrease in the time that it takes to make the connection and in the time to actually get the referral closed. In terms of data security, that's built into all of the platforms that our partners wind up using. And so they're HIPAA compliant, FERPA compliant, SAMHSA compliant, and they usually require, at least for the Unite Us platform, a one-time consent. And so just a few more examples from our other partners. Similar to Louisville, other communities are working with external developers. So for example, in Chattanooga, Hamilton County, they work with PCG. In Oakland, they work with Salesforce. In Unity Point, in Southern Illinois, they work with Worldwide Tech Connections, which actually is able to help them communicate with families in multiple languages, which is a different aspect of it. And then, but other ones that don't have the resources to build out these ones, they can use things that they already have in existence, like Google Classrooms or an existing data platform that they have, and they just tweak it for this. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions, and I don't know, I'll check in the chat if we've got anything, and I will not be the only one to answer questions, but all of my colleagues are available for that part.
And for questions, feel free either to post them in the chat, or you can use the hand raise function, and we will call on you. And if we, I'll give some more time, but if we don't have questions, I don't know if there's anything that my colleagues will want to add, just to add a little more flavor to how all of this, we wanted to give you some concrete examples from the field, but they really do vary. So by choosing just, Nashville or Oakland and Unity Point and Louisville, those are just to try to make things a little more concrete. Let's see who's involved in. Yeah, I see a couple questions here. One is for Unite Us, who's involved in interpreting data and making it actionable. And so, interestingly, in Louisville, the Unite Us platform has first been put in place as part of the United Ways work. So that was where it initiated, and then it's been moving into the schools as well. But one important component of moving it into schools, of course, is thinking about security and who has access to it. They have a set of family resource coordinators called Friskies. And those are the people who will be trained and will have access to the data, in addition to counselors, who typically have access to that information.
And I will add, I'm from Louisville and I work at Metro United Way. And so we have an internal data analyst who works specifically for United Community. So she offers us a lot of high level data. So we also use the United Community to help inform all of the other departments in our organization. So of course, like when anyone who goes into the system. So first of all, we call it the no wrong door approach. So anybody who goes into the platform, there's always some type of service, for them to get. So the data is collected and it's interpreted through our data analyst who works in-house.
Thank you so much for clarifying. And I'm so glad you're on. You can be our resident question answerer for Louisville. Perfect. I know we've got questions, it looks like, from Nicole and from Omar, and we have one from Aisha. So Aisha, about asking how one might begin this process in a district. I think that is a softball to Lynn, who is leading this charge.
So, I would say one great example we have of starting this work in addition, actually a couple of great examples we have. The first thing you really need is just for those with some authority to put it in place to really make the decision that it's worth doing. I know that sounds a little bit obvious, but it is, frankly, the most important part is you have to get leadership on board to make some of the changes that are needed, and then to take some time to develop your plan and your strategy, and to figure out, frankly, where your starting point is. And hopefully that's something that the later part of today's session will help you think about, would be, where should you start within your district? I would say, for the most part, districts have found that starting with the Navigator is really the way to go. I mean, it has such a meaningful impact immediately because you start forming those connections between adults and students, and everybody can feel the change. I mean, we hear from teachers how much it changes their practice. We hear, from those who are participating, from students, that it's changed their whole perspective on coming to school and has given them tangible supports. So that's not the only starting point, and I would say, for example, in Louisville, the starting point really was the data platform, and so that is another way to go. But it does take a good amount of time and money to start with the data platform, and the cost, the barriers to entry are lower if you start with a Navigator.
Thanks. Let's go, Omar. I think you're next up.
Sure. Thank you, Daniela. I just wanted to clarify. Could you clarify navigators? Could the navigators be anyone that is providing supports to young people in a school?
So the answer is yes. It depends on the model that you want. So again, sometimes it could be teachers, sometimes it could be counselors. It also, because some communities are deciding to do it for all students in an entire school district, let's say, or grade level to have a navigator, whereas other ones, it's a very small subset. I think it's about depending on your capacity of the resources that you have, but that's why we really love the Unity Point example of how they do have a bus driver. Sometimes that it could be whoever really has a close relationship with the student, and want to even push out that it could be a community member. If you have a model that integrates community partners in such a way that it doesn't have to be someone coming from the school.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Nicole, I think you were next up.
Great. Thank you, Daniela. I loved hearing about how the model for this is very flexible in order to work best with each school district and kind of what systems they already have in place. I know we heard from Hamilton County District last session about their model, and that they have, and I think you referenced it again today, Daniela, 152 partners that they work with. And it was really interesting for me to see, like, it was broken out by family services, housing services, and so forth, after school programs. I'm wondering if you've found any or have seen any data from districts around the benefits or like barriers in terms of managing so many partnerships, and if you've found that some districts, have an easier time if they work with a smaller number of partners, like within each of these different sectors or types of supports.
I feel like Lynn or Tauhida might have some really good insight into that in particular.
Tauhida, I wonder if you have thoughts on that, given that, you've done such deep work in this area.
Yeah, so I have a background in community schools work, and very similarly, when you look at student success planning, my recommendation is always to make sure that partners are aligned and integrated to the school improvement plan and the district accountability plan, in regard to making sure that you don't just have partners for partnership's sake, right? But they are aligned and integrated in a way that it is moving the needle not only for the individual student, but also looking at the priorities holistically for the community, but the individual student need as well. So the number of partners are not necessarily an implication that you're successful because you have X number of partners, but that those partnerships are intentional and embedded and ingrained and coordinated to meet student need.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tauhida. So we have 1 minute left, and I'm just going to consolidate two questions. I don't know if we'll be able to answer them now or if they'll be in follow-ups. One, again, would be a really good question for you, Lynn, about the evaluation and how these programs and models are being evaluated. And actually, one was an evaluation, one's on funding. How often is it coming from philanthropy versus government? And the third kind of theme seems to be around how do you integrate into things that are already happening, like student support structures versus creating something new. And I'm sure that we cannot do those three in 1 minute. So maybe if you want to speak to the funding and the evaluation, Lynn, and then we can talk about, I actually think we'll get to building on existing work in the next section that Tauhida is running.
Sure. I would say, first of all, on the funding, it is possible to start with very little initial outlay, but it's not really, it's certainly not recommended to continue that way because, you have to really ask a lot of people without, additional compensation if that were to be the case. So, we know a number of communities that started during the pandemic, and because schedules were already so much in upheaval, it was possible to just rearrange the way time was structured to enable more time one-on-one with students. But moving forward, you would really want to be able to build in, at least stipends or additional positions. What we have been seeing is kind of a mix of some foundation support for specific elements, especially things like building out a data platform, and kind of that getting started. And also, there are a lot of opportunities at the moment for using some of the federal funding, and the new money as part of the American Rescue Plan, to fund parts of it. It's not a long-term solution because that funding does have an endpoint, but it's a good starting place. The other question about evaluation is, so those organizations that have already been working at this for a while have identified metrics, a whole range of academic and non-academic and often qualitative data collection as well to track progress. And then the newer communities are mostly in progress right now. So right now they're in the process of determining what metrics make the most sense and figuring out how to track those.
And Lynn, I just wanted to lift that the Children's Cabinet in the fullest form of the student success planning both serves to coordinate not only some of those resources, but also some of the partnerships that we talked about earlier, and allows for that coordination at the ecosystem level.
Yes, excellent point. Thank you for saying that.
So I'm going to move us to Tawhida's section. And for those that we did not get the questions answered, I know that they're being recorded and we've got the chat as well. So hopefully be able to send responses out to that. I think one of the other questions that we didn't cover was around data, and do students get to choose what data is shared, which is a really important topic to cover. But again, in sub 2 minutes, I don't think we can do it justice. So with that, should I pass it on to you, Tawhida?
Yes, thank you. I'm Tawhida Jackson. And I am the part that I'm going to focus on today is really looking at how we start to begin to apply some of the knowledge that you just learned from the slide deck. And we will do that by engaging in a small group activity, which will allow us to apply what we learned to have the opportunity to really think about the coordination and alignment efforts to support the whole child, which is the premise of why we're doing this work, and really thinking about community implementation and progress existing on a developmental continuum. So before I bring up the Mentimeter, I'm going to ask you in the chat box, I put the website and the code to our Mentimeter exercise that will allow you to access Mentimeter if you enter that code. We're going to ask you for some information before we go into the small groups. And I just wanted to lift something that Lynn said earlier around like the developmental continuum of this. So wherever you are in this work is a good place to start. We're here to be able to provide you support wherever you are on that continuum. So as you log in and enter the code, I am going to bring up the Mentimeter and share my screen. But I want you to also answer just the first question. So please don't go to the next question, because we will have some time in the large group to be able to debrief some of the things that we do in the small group. So I want you to select the stage of development that best describes where your community is on the overall student success planning journey. So as we consider those 4 components that Daniela just highlighted, overall, where would you say you are? So a lot of times you may have things at the school level that you can build on. You may have things at the ecosystem level that you can build on. You might be thinking about a data platform currently. But when you think about exploratory, we're thinking about just beginning and exploring the strategy and maybe having not having any formal components in schools or communities to support it. If you pick developmental, there are some things that might be familiar, or people that might be familiar with the strategy and having some key components in the school and community to support it. Advanced would be more in the realm of key partners supporting the strategy and coordination and alignment of the school and community resources. It might have several components of the strategy. And then lastly, if you're an exemplar, you would potentially have a children's cabinet like we talked about, or another designated body working to coordinate and align community efforts, and that there are a lot of existing services and coordination across the community. So the consensus, it looks like most people are exploring, and we have about 20% in the developmental stage and 10% in the advanced stage. And the beauty of a learning community is that we can learn from each other. So those people who have been in this work as we're in the small group, I encourage you to give some examples about how you're doing this work. And then if you're in the exploratory phase, to ask the questions that you think you need to have answered to be able to think about your next steps as we're going through the small group activities.